All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first meeting of July, Tuesday, July 2nd. I will have our city clerk start with our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Karen Howe. Councilmember Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen. Councilmember Sid Gupta.
Here.
Councilmember Roisin O'Farrell.
Here.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Howe?
Thank you. I'd like to move to excuse Kent Treen from this meeting.
Second. All right, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great, thank you so much. Councilmember O'Farrell, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Happy to. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. I will read our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. All right, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, now we will start public comment. We'll start in the room and then we'll move to online. And I know we have a public hearing later on, so this will just be regular public comment first. All right, Mary Wichter. And while you're walking up, are the rest of these just sign in, or do you want to speak?
So the other kids who just presented.
Oh, okay, awesome. All right, thank you. Mary.
Hi, my name's Mary Wichter. I've lived in Sammamish for 24 years, and I want to say that's the most impressive pre-start to a meeting ever. Thank you so much. So you have a bunch of stormwater things tonight, and I'll be speaking for the public hearing. So I live in Tamarack, and Inglewood is just adjacent. Those areas have had a lot of problems for a long time. The city's had 5 surface water emergency ordinances, like there was an emergency tree ordinance, if you remember. They did them for stormwater, and they repeated them 5 times. And it took until 2018, 2019 for code to get adopted. So there actually is separate code for Inglewood and Tamarack. And the reason is because we have a lot of development that has occurred because they're historic plats from 1889 and 1964, probably before most of you were born. And so those areas need special consideration. So as we go through this year, we have critical areas ordinance coming up. We have a comprehensive plan for 2024 coming up. We've got development regulations phase 3 that's going to implement those things. It needs to be adopted by the end of the year. And all those areas impact where I live. So it's really important when we do stormwater stuff, which I'll speak to separately, that we don't take and make the code not work or allow there to be holes for those. And then also on the Lewis Thompson project, I'm really glad for it to go forward. I'm glad it's getting funded and that it's gonna be done. The sidewalk's super important, but it's really a stormwater project, tight line first. And I think that there's a couple places where water floods across the road, and when you've got water under a road or above a road, it really wears out the road and creates cracks and things. It's also very unsafe because it can be slick. So if you're driving along, you can actually have where you lose control. It's called like hydroplaning. So they're not fixing those flooding areas with the project, but I know Audrey is really good with their stormwater CIPs and the things she's listed, and at least there's kind of a groundwater seepage that happens on the parkway. She's got that kind of as the next set of stormwater CIPs are going to be done, but there's a couple other places at 210th Place, at 210th Avenue that flood and go across, and the last thing I would want to have happen is that we do a great big project and we end up with accidents where people get hurt because we've got water sheeting across the road because we didn't fix it when there's a stormwater project going in. So in all the councils that I've spoken to, I started speaking publicly in 2015, I've never heard any council member speak against safety. Everybody says safety's number one. It's a priority. It doesn't get checked very much on you guys' bulletins in the front of it, but we need safety to be first. So I think lowering the speed limit for Lewis Thompson to 25, you've done that in ordinances twice before when there's a lot of road construction going on, and really addressing the flooding. And if it can't be done during this project, please do it in the next stormwater.
Thank you. Is it sorry?
Thank you. I would like to talk about what happened in Pine Lake, the hate speech that was all over the ground, all over the parking lot over there. I am extremely disappointed by you guys. The police acted the way it was supposed to act. The FBI was notified. I wonder how many of you were actually there. I wonder if there was a statement issued by you to the public. My community and I are deeply affected by it. I am thankful for the Platonians, I don't know, I probably messed that up, who went over there and fixed it. That I would expect to see from you guys. I went to you. I saw you during the Metropolitan meeting. I warned you about this. I told you how much we're impacted as a community by it, how much we can't celebrate Hanukkah the way that we used to celebrate it, how much my community lives in fear in Sammamish. I am very happy that those kids were in the previous meeting here telling you guys how Sammamish is the safest city. We don't feel like that anymore.
Thank you. All right, do we have anyone sign up online?
I think the students were going to go through their presentation again for the meeting as part of public comment.
Yeah, it's the same presentation, so we're happy to do it again, or if you want to give back the time, you can do that as well.
Oh, no, yeah, you can definitely do it again.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, if you'll stand at the podium, probably would be the best.
They will need to use the mic just for the YouTube video. They can't hear without the mic. Thank you.
Are you guys ready? Oh, they did? Okay. So, are you guys ready? Okay. My name is Ishika, and I'm here today with Ayan, Anya, Radhan, Rishi, and Ishan, and we are the Incredibots, a first-year FLL team. FLL stands for First LEGO League, which is a STEM competition with heavy emphasis on robotics and innovation. This year, 35,000 teams participated from across 111 countries in FLL. And from Washington State alone, over 400 teams participated. After our stellar performance at the state finals, we were sent to an international competition held in Boston to compete. At this competition, we won the Champions Award, marking us as one of the top teams in the world. All elements of our work were recognized on the stage, including our robot, team core values, and our innovation project, Sonic Dunk.
This year, the first LEGO League asked us to take our favorite hobby and make it interesting to others using arts and craft. Our group took a vote and we chose basketball.
It's a sport we've all grown to love, especially during COVID, when shooting hoops was one of the only things we could do, indoors or outdoors.
After doing some research, we realized that those who have no or low vision have struggles playing the game of basketball. So we asked ourselves, how can we make basketball fun and available for those who have visual impairments or are blind?
Introducing our innovation, Sonic Dunk, an audible basketball kit which uses sound technology to guide players toward the basket and can be retrofitted onto any basketball hoop.
Our initial idea was just to create a hoop that emits different sounds based on how the shot was taken. Additionally, we have a custom basketball with bells inside of it, making it easier for the player to track and locate the ball, as you can hear here.
Now, after talking about ourselves like Elon Musk, we wanted to see if our ideas would actually benefit the visually impaired. So we spoke to
The Northwest Association for Blind Athletes,
national level soccer players at an Indian blind school,
STEM directors and coaches that work with the visually impaired from the Issaquah School District.
People who are low and no vision from the Lighthouse and our former Paralympian from Spokane.
OneCourt.io, a startup working to make live sports accessible.
And the Washington State School for the Blind.
So what did we learn?
Lots. For example, when one court asked us how do players know where they are on the court, we created our tactile format, which lets players know where they are on the court and how far away they are from the hoop. For example, here's a three-point line and here's a free throw line.
we also learned that bright colors help those who have visual impairments. So we added bright colors like blue and orange on our tactile training mat.
Through our research, we learned that players also use training mats to help them with their footwork and dribbling skills. We created and tested a tactile version of this mat, as you can see here.
All these improvements helped us create a more compelling innovation project, which was later recognized as the best innovation project in Western Washington State, as well as the international competition that we went to.
After the state finals, we wanted to continue improving our innovation project, so we added a gaming element to it through our app.
Our innovation project isn't just about basketball. It's about inclusion, independence, confidence, and fun. It's about making the sport we love accessible to all. Now, we would like to show you a quick demo of Sonic Dunk.
The hoop makes a continuous beeping sound so that the athlete knows where the hoop is. If the athlete shoots the ball too high or too low, the hoop will make a different sound to tell the athlete that they missed.
Also, learning from our favorite gamified app, Duolingo, we have a companion app which connects to the hoop using Bluetooth, as shown here.
Now let's play some basketball to show you how the hoop and the app works.
Now I'm going to shoot the ball and I'm going to miss it.
As you can see, the counter for too high has increased, as well as that we've integrated a text-to-speech in our app, making it easier for the blind or visually impaired athlete.
Now I'm going to shoot the ball and I'm going to make the shot.
You made a basket.
As you can see, the counter increased for the number of times you made a basket. We also have included a personal stat screen in our app that shows your highest score, your lowest score, and your number of games played.
We also have a leaderboard in the app so that players can see their worldwide rankings. This motivates them even when they're playing alone.
Basketball players use training mats to work on their footwork and dribbling, so we created a tactile version of this using the scores 1, 2, 3, and 4, and give guided drills on our website.
We also created a belt, which gives haptic feedback to the player based on whether or not they're oriented toward the basket. For example, when I'm oriented to the basket, nothing happens, but when I turn away, a motor will vibrate to alert the player.
In order to make Sonic Dunk safer, we wanted to help players find the ball even when it has stopped rolling. So inspired by the gyro sensor in our robot kits, we created a beeper to place inside of the ball that will start beeping once the ball has stopped rolling. For example, I'm simulating the ball rolling, and when it stops, it'll start to beep.
Our design and code is available on our website so you can make Sonic Dunk at your home, but we're not stopping there.
Ameribility, a service provider for the disabled, has committed to working with us on improving our project and taking it to the market.
We have also talked to an industrial designer in Portland who has helped us understand the process and cost of taking Sonic Dunk to the next level.
we impacted our community in multiple ways. For example, we hosted a event at a library with 2 other FLL teams, and we also hosted a show and tell at a local elementary school where over 50 families showed up, and we helped create 4 new FLL teams. 2 FLL teams now want us to mentor them.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. We're not done yet. We're the Incredibots.
Great. Thank you all again for doing that. I love that you have it memorized. It makes it really nice to listen to. Yeah, we really appreciate your innovation, your excitement about the project, and bringing it to us twice. But I'm excited to see what you all do next. Sounds like there's a new project coming with new guidelines. Are you going to be on the same team for the next year? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, thank you again, everybody. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move online.
Per the reasonable accommodation, those who had pre-registered by 3 o'clock today, please raise your hand if you wish to provide comment. I see no commenters. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, next up, I will entertain a motion for the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. So now, it's weird not having proclamations. Next up, we have a public hearing for Sammamish Stormwater Addendum Code amendments. We'll have Audrey, Greg, I believe they're probably all online.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. I am joined by Greg Samatiu, our Deputy Director of Public Works this evening. For the record, I'm Audrey Sarcy, the Director of Public Works for the city, and I will be joined by a few staff members that have been hard at work on our stormwater code amendments process for the last few months, along with some consulting teams. As soon as Stephanie Sullivan, our Senior Stormwater Program Manager, is able to join, she'll introduce the team. While we're waiting for Stephanie, I can go ahead and speak to this item just quickly, and then we can go ahead and get going on the presentation. I know we have a lot on the agenda this evening. So this is an item, oh, perfect timing. Stephanie, I was just introing this. As soon as your camera is all ready, go ahead and provide the introduction, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mr. City Manager. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Stephanie Sullivan, the Senior Stormwater Program Manager. Tonight, I'm joined by Lisa Weir, our Stormwater Engineering Technician, who's the Project Manager for the Stormwater Code Amendments. And also joining us is Toby Kanan, our Senior Stormwater Engineer, who will be available for questions. The presentation tonight will be run by Helen Stanton and Wayne Carlson, our consultants with AHBL. So these Stormwater Code Amendments are staff-driven, and the intent is to continue to improve the application of our drainage requirements. And the reason I mention that is our NPDES National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit for the stormwater program with the state is recently reissued as of July 1st. And so that permit is effective August 1st, which includes required code updates. So you will be seeing us again before June 30th, 2027. So with that, I'll go ahead and let our consultant team kick us off.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We're going to be speaking today about some amendments to the Sammamish Addendum to the King County Surface Water Design Manual. Next slide. So we have just a few slides this evening. The agenda for our presentation will begin with a brief introduction, discuss the project background, the purpose of the amendments. We'll describe what those proposed amendments are, and then next steps. So as a point of introduction as to where this has been, on May 2nd, we presented the proposed amendments to the Sammamish Addendum to the 21 King County Surface Water Design Manual to the Planning Commission in a public workshop style format. We followed that up with 2 weeks later on May 16th with a public hearing where the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council move to adopt the proposed amendments to the Sammamish Addendum. And then here we are this evening, where we are here in a public hearing and requesting that the City Council take action to adopt the proposed amendments to the Sammamish Addendum to the King County Surface Water Design Manual. Next slide. So just as a quick point of background, as Stephanie kind of correctly pointed out, the City Stormwater Code adopts the 2021 King County Surface Water Design Manual, and we do that to meet the NPDES permit requirements. And so as Stephanie indicated, that permit is something that's reissued every 5 years, and that's why you've seen Stephanie, Lisa, Audrey, even Helen and I, over the last few years, coming up and bringing forth amendments so that the city stays current with its compliance with the manual that it's covered under. So the city has historically adopted an addendum to the King County Surface Water Design Manual to customize the manual to reflect localized conditions and preferences. And so that's what we're talking about this evening. Next slide. So staff is proposing 5 amendments to the Sammamish Addendum, and those amendments, as Stephanie indicated, were initiated by staff to address local issues and scenarios that occur within the city. Next slide. So I'm going to address these proposed amendments one by one, and then we'll kind of open it up for questions. So the first one was to reduce restrictions on bioretention under drains. So the King County Surface Water Design Manual prohibits bioretention with under drains unless they are approved via a stormwater design manual adjustment. So consider that similar to, in land use parlance, a variance. So the city staff periodically receives applications for adjustments for the installation of under drains. The city is proposing to adopt ecology standards which allow under drains for bioretention without the administrative steps of an adjustment where specific design standards are met. And so this is just kind of aligning the use of bioretention under drains with the ecology manual. The King County manual is the one that's locally adopted, and it's a technical equivalent to the ecology manual. Next slide. The next one was related to dispersion device setbacks. The King County Surface Water Design Manual stipulates that diversion devices are not permitted within 50 feet of a steep slope hazard area, erosion hazard area, or landslide hazard area. This stipulation can result in unnecessarily restricting the use of dispersion facilities in areas where such facilities would be particularly effective. So the city is proposing an amendment to permit dispersion devices within that 50-foot setback of the toe of a slope where approved by a geotechnical engineer or engineering geologist, and that dispersion be away from the steep slope hazard area. And this is a graphic that we can talk about more after the presentation, but it really kind of depicts what we're talking about. So in the middle between those lines, you see the steep slope hazard area We're not referring to dispersion, upslope of the steep slope hazard area, but downslope and away from the steep slope. Next slide. Rain barrels. We are proposing to amend the addendum to require, as a condition of engineering approval, that new rain barrels be permanently labeled that indicate that the rain barrel was installed as a condition of engineering approval, and that as such, the rain barrel is a stormwater facility that may not be removed. This came up where I think some property owners unwittingly removed rain barrels and installed air conditioning units on the little concrete pads that the rain barrel was situated on, and these are stormwater facilities that then kind of compromise the design of the system when they're removed. Next slide. Number 4 was prohibiting shared LID facilities. So staff is concerned that where LID facilities are shared, it can be difficult to enforce the management and maintenance of the facility. So staff is proposing to amend the addendum to restrict the sharing of LID facilities across property lines to only those instances where long-term maintenance is vested within a single entity. So for instance, in this illustration that you have here, if this bioretention facility was, say, straddling, and extending across 2 different lot lines, the maintenance responsibility would have to either, be vested in, say, a single property owner, an HOA, et cetera, but not where 2 different property owners would each have, some type of shared responsibility that, maybe the other was assuming that their corollary was doing the maintenance. So in any event, it's intended to have a kind of a single point of maintenance that the city can address if maintenance is not occurring. Next slide. And then finally, respect to clarifying the infiltration rate testing procedures. So staff is proposing to provide clarification on required infiltration rate testing procedures for various development scenarios. And so the current King County Surface Water Design Manual allows a range of test procedures to assess soil percolation rates for LID infiltration facilities. And this change would mandate a more accurate testing method where infiltration is proposed near vulnerable slopes and soils. So again, we have we had a study session May 2nd, public hearing on May 16th, and we're here before you this evening for a public hearing on the addendum amendments. Next slide. And so the Planning Commission has recommended that the City Council move to adopt the proposed amendments to the Sammamish addendum to the King County Surface Water Design Manual. So staff is recommending that the City Council move to adopt the proposed amendments to the Sammamish addendum to the King County Surface Water Design Manual. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, this is so loud. Okay, so I can open the public hearing. Audrey, is that we're good to go? Start with public comment and questions?
Yes, Mayor. And we are recommending opening and closing the public hearing this evening. It did have 2 readings at Planning Commission.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I'm opening the public hearing for the Sammamish Stormwater Addendum Code amendments. And first up, we're going to start with public comment regarding this hearing in the room with Mary Wichter.
Good evening, Council. My name's Mary Wichter. I've lived in Sammamish 24 years. I did print 2 pages from the packet. One is when drainage review is required, which I folded, and then this one is the diagram that Wayne Carlson from AHBL just showed you. So I'm for all the Stormwater Code amendments. I think the staff is excellent. They do a good job, all 1 through 5. However, I do have pretty severe concerns about number 2, which has to do with steep slope. If you have a steep slope, you can't put water in it here, but it's supposed to have a 50-foot buffer. That is what it says in the King County Code, and we want to stick with that. When you start putting it in, let's say you have in Inglewood, you have a 25-foot lot that's 100 feet long. If you don't have the 50-foot buffer midway through the lot, they can hire a geotech who says, go ahead, put your water here. And that water can go there dispersed, whether it's over top of the soils vegetated or whether it's near surface, which might get saturated, or if it's got the dispersion device buried over a wide area. That water, depending on how much it is and how often it runs, Inglewood basically has like steep slopes and then a bench and then steep slopes. So I'll actually show you that on a map. So this is the city's map from 2013, which was in code. It stayed all the way in the code all the way till 2017 when new code was adopted. So the flow here is this way. So maybe I'll turn it this way. This is downhill. You've got steep slopes here. People could put things into the water. It would go through and it would end up at the houses below. We have that same situation in Tamarack. It does happen. I live in the area. In fact, this diagram could actually be where I live. This could be 209th Avenue. This is 208th Avenue. We have a steep slope. And if you try to disperse in here, even with the vegetated thing, a lot of times we get so much water that the vegetation just gets wiped out. And then there's 2 houses below us that we could give the water to, which is just really not the right thing to do. Might help me, but it's gonna hurt them. So staff is very good, and I know Toby's a PE, a project engineer, and he's talked about, well, when you have to let people build, maybe this dispersion thing is a good idea in certain places, very limiting conditions. I agree with that statement, but they're trying to adopt code that goes for the whole landslide hazard area, which goes all the way along the city. So anyway, you've seen it before, so it's all the way along. So if you want it in just places, let's limit the code. Let's say, don't use it in Inglewood, historic plat. Don't use it in Tamarack. And to show you that you already have code, this is one of the decision trees for stormwater drainage. And the 4th one says, within a critical drainage area, which is that thing that goes all the way along, in the Tamarack or Inglewood historic plats, and would result in any net increase. So if you're doing anything, we have separate code, and there's several places it appears in Sammamish Development Code. So let's not make this change now. Let's not do number 2, or at least limit it so it's not in Inglewood and Tamarack. Make an amendment.
Thank you. All right. And Karen, I know we received yours via email. Awesome. Okay. All right. Thank you. Did we have anyone sign up online?
Per the reasonable accommodation, if you registered by 3 p.m. today and wish to comment, please raise your hand. We do have one commenter. Mr. Stickney.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney here. I attended the planning commissions when they talked about this, and they did vote in favor of all the changes on a 7-0 vote. But I believe Chairman Boffman expressed some concerns, not major concerns, about the infiltration within the 50 feet of slope and a bit of unintended consequences. So he just had some reservations, but he did vote in favor of it. So the only reason I mentioned that is that might be one to kind of keep an eye on a couple of them if they're done, to see how they actually work, to see if any future change may be needed or not. Otherwise, I'm in support of all of them myself, and I agree with Mary Wichter about, because of the cumulative effects over time in Tamarack and Inglewood, you might want some special code for those areas, but the rest of the city, I think what you're doing is appropriate. My suggestion would just be to have a system to keep a fairly close eye on the actual on-the-ground reality after one of these is installed. That's my only comment on this. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And it was just the one, right?
Yep, that's all for pre-registered commenters. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, Council, I'll open up to you for questions and discussion before we close the hearing. Deputy Mayor Howe?
Thank you. This question is for Audrey and others on the team, and it has to do with the geotechnical component of this. Can you walk me through a scenario of what a geotechnical expert does when they assess, for example, an area for drainage? Where are they testing? How do they do it, kind of? And can you give me an example where something has failed a geotest? So I understand that.
That's a great question. I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Stephanie and Toby to add a little bit more to it. But depending on the type of drainage review that the applicant is required to go through for their development of their parcel or their land, it does require different pieces to that. When we are looking at low impact development, there are different types of tests that we look at as well, and different things that we look at from the geotechnical perspective as well. In terms of some failing or not passing, all of that information is typically summarized in a technical information report, or TIR, that is submitted with the application. In terms of the details, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie and Toby.
Thank you, Audrey. I would add that prior to geotech, there's also a critical area study that happens that documents the critical areas involved in a property, which one part of that would be the landslide hazard area. So Toby, if you'd like to go into the specific.
No, thank you, Stephanie. There's, to be real clear, anytime there's a steep slope or a wetland or any type of critical area, studies have to be, prepared and accompany the applications. And in the case of, a steep slope, it's a licensed geologist or a licensed geotechnical engineer. So there's somebody whose, professional credentials are on the line. And with respect to dispersion itself, I think it's important to recognize that the intent isn't necessarily to pump the water into the ground, if you will, so much as it is to literally just disperse it, deconcentrate it, if you will, so that the downstream properties aren't as impacted. And that's one point I would want to make, is that regardless of whether this is allowed or not allowed, you're going to get the same amount of runoff going downhill. This is just a way to kind of deconcentrate it, as I said, and try to disperse it so there is fewer impacts. The other point I'd want to make is that there is an allowance in our code already, in the critical areas code, that allows work within 50 feet of a steep slope hazard area. And I think what we're viewing this as much as anything, is just trying to bring it into alignment, and again, avoiding the need to pursue this, with a drainage adjustment or other, significant land use element to it. But in terms of the actual testing, kind of circling back to Councilmember Howe's and Deputy Mayor Howe's question, really what they look at, they'll do some test pits to identify the type and depth of the soils, evaluate the stability of the uphill slope, and categorize the amount of groundwater that might be there, the depth of the groundwater, and assess, really how effective or how useful dispersion might be in that circumstance. There's no, specific test per se for dispersion. Ultimately, what we would rely upon are recommendations in the report for the use of that particular BMP. And, there's cases, we discussed these during the Planning Commission discussions, where those things, if we push back on them, ultimately not allowed them. So I think the final takeaway I'd offer is that we're talking about something that's probably going to show up maybe 2, maybe 3 times a year. So this would be a pretty unusual case. But the few circumstances we have seen it, it really has penalized property owners where they haven't been able to utilize this BMP. So I don't know if that answers all the questions Councilmember Howe had, but I'm happy to weigh in further.
Well, I'd like to understand too. Thank you for that, and that is helpful. And I appreciate the fact that, this is a professional license that's on the line, but trying to understand exactly the process and how thorough it is, I guess. And also, why would certain areas be treated differently than others? Like, why should we look potentially at Tamarack as a different scenario than any other steep slope area? Or is there something special about that? About the older plats? Or is it?
Yeah, this is something that's, I appreciate this question. This is blanket. We're proposing this for the entire city, obviously. And I think the elements in Tamarack that are unique is that there's really no stormwater infrastructure central to the streets and other things. So when there are issues, for example, they tend to be more pronounced. Were initially ditches and what have you that were built there, and there's areas and locations where that, the maintenance of those elements just hasn't kept up with, with progress, if you will.
So does the city look at that as it's issuing these kinds of permits, where it's looking at the surrounding area, knowing conclusively whether they have stormwater accommodations or don't? And does that go into the final permitting process for the proposed development?
It does. And, every project that's required to go through, drainage reviews and, short of the real small ones, is required to do a downstream analysis. And that gets rolled into the technical information report. And it's important to recognize that these are kind of a qualitative look rather than a real in-depth quantitative look. So there's an assessment of if problems exist and what have you. But, there's, the challenges, if you will, throughout the city differ, depending on neighborhood to neighborhood. Soils are different, runoff patterns are different, rainfall is different. So what happens in, we have devoted a lot of time and energy thinking about Tamarack, not just on this particular amendment, but, in different areas as well. And again, the problems are unique. How do we tackle those? But the current, I think it's important to recognize we are not proposing or advocating for wholesale reinvention of our existing rules and requirements, so much as we've identified one place in our code that really doesn't, it's not responsive to the best or most opportune way to pursue drainage on a handful of situations that we encounter each year. So we want to allow that tool to move forward, and that's really what this one's about, this particular part of the amendment. So,
thank you for that.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Those were great questions. I'm kind of building on that. You made a comment that said there'd be the same amount of water, whether the dispersion was allowed or not, but that would only be if the development were able to proceed, and they may not be able to proceed if they didn't have this exception. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Okay.
That's a real good question. I think, the way the development works is, there's land use and what have you that informs what's allowed. And I think Audrey and Stephanie probably have a little broader understanding of those constraints than I do. Can comment on that. But when it comes time to, yes, this project, if you will, fits on the property, they have to go through, essentially a menu of different options for, flow control, through this core requirement 9 adherence, which is a specific requirement in the stormwater manual. And they've got to go through line by line. You start at the top of the list, you work to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And all this is doing is opening up, but a slight adjustment to one of those menu options where we would allow dispersion on certain downhill areas. If that's not available, then the opportunity would be moving down the list to the next menu item and so on. So there's really no, this in and of itself wouldn't act as a prohibition against development if it were to be eliminated from the code.
Awesome. And is there somewhere in the code that addresses Mary's concern, which is for where this is, it's at the bottom of a steep slope, but not that far away. It's actually at the top of the next one. So is there something in there that would prevent this from happening in that situation?
There is, and that's the setback would apply to the top of the steep slope, if you will. That's not changing at all.
How far is the setback from the top? That's only 50 feet, right?
The conventional setback is 50 feet. Depending on the type of dispersion facility, that can increase to as much as 200 feet. So there's some built-in, buffering, if you will, associated with the design of the actual facility.
And so it sounds like this option on your menu list of option isn't necessarily last. So even in these special situations when we're on these sort of maybe in the middle of a steep slope, do we really think that this is a preferred option from a drainage perspective? Not that I don't want to penalize, property owners, but at the same time, given our challenges with stormwater, I don't want to sort of open up an option that we might otherwise want to only be a very last resort in normal circumstances.
I think it's a great question. And just to jump in really quick, Toby, it does provide a great opportunity for unique cases for different parcels when they are being developed for us to consider this amongst many other tools to provide stormwater management on that property or tied to that particular development. There are a lot of different things that we look at that Toby described in very detailed way as it moves through the design review process, and all of those requirements are presented to us by professional engineers, professional geologists, or geotechnical engineers, and then also reviewed by professional engineers, geotechnical engineers, and geologists. So there's a lot of things that are reviewed in a very, very high level, detailed fashion to get to the end result, and we just want to have an opportunity to consider utilizing this tool in some circumstances.
Okay, and then this is my last question on this topic, I promise. Toby, you made a comment about, when answering Deputy Mayor Howe's question about are the cumulative effects taken into consideration. It's my understanding that there is nowhere in our code that actually looks at cumulative effects. So when all of those assessments are done, they're only looking at the change that you're making. So for example, if you were adding a patio, which was going to add impervious surface, they don't look at the cumulative effects of everything above it or everything on that same sort of slope level. It only looks at the effects from that addition. And so, I guess it wouldn't be the straw that broke the camel's back. It would be the drop that breaks the stormwater. But can you clarify that? Because I thought, if I recall, and we had many, 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 many hours of stormwater discussions over the past few years, that we don't have anything that looks at cumulative effects.
I can jump in really quick, if that's okay. So I would say for some of the cumulative effects, we have a lot of programs in place. Our retrofit program, and we'll hear later tonight about a basin plan that does look at the cumulative effects in a broader area. And those are really great opportunities for us to learn how some of these changes are doing over time, along with others in ways we can improve the drainage basin in itself. In terms of, this is kind of a different process when we have to look at and provide permitting process for individual developments as they're coming in. But our code and our permit and everything that we do as a stormwater utility is looking at the cumulative effects over time. It's just done in a lot of different ways, programs, not necessarily for this particular code amendments that we're looking at tonight.
Right. So just to clarify, so especially in the Tamarack area where there is no stormwater management and there is no retrofit program for the city because it's all privately done, there is no looking at cumulative effects in that area.
We did look at some larger effects when we did look at the ZACUS basin plan. So that was part of one of our initial basin planning efforts that the city began work on years ago. So we do look at the entire basin. The recommended basin improvements are often separated by public improvements that the city can consider, code amendments for, policy direction for, capital projects. And then there could be some considerations for a particular neighborhood that would be privately maintained if they would like to improve their stormwater infrastructure within their neighborhood.
Yeah, to that, I would add as well that generally the way stormwater codes in the state are structured is through a series of prescriptive requirements that this kind of follows on the heels of growth management, where growth pays for growth, if you will. And in this case, philosophically anyway, development one handles drainage and runoff from that project. The next one down the line does the same. And that's distilled down on frankly, probably about as small an area as you can discreetly cleave off, which is an individual residential house. So each home within Tamarack is compelled to look at that. And that's where we go through this big process of drainage review. But the code and the requirements and the technical expectations are all kind of set up and established in response to, trying to address that on an individual parcel basis. So that's kind of, philosophically how the, state, the Department of Ecology has structured the requirements to this point. But, having each individual parcel or each individual property look at cumulative effects is, you're correct. That is not part of expectations at this point.
Right. So like in an area like Tamarack, where much of the development occurred under really old, not so great stormwater code, none of those effects were looked at back then, unfortunately, right? We didn't have good stormwater code like we have today. So this new thing could be compliant, but it could literally be adding that water down the hill where those downhill people aren't dealing with it properly, and now it becomes problematic. Right? I think that's what we had looked at in the past when we set up some of these exemptions for those areas, was that there just wasn't the same level of stormwater code when much of that development occurred. It was under King County, and even when the city first incorporated it took us a while before we got better code. So I do see where that can be a concern. I do have a question on number 3, which I think is the rain barrels. Is there a way for us to add that to the title of the home? Because I like the idea of putting a sign on it, but in someone's backyard when nobody's looking, is that gonna stop anyone? Whereas I think for some of our exemptions and things, we've actually looked at, can we actually add that to the title so that when you go to sell your home, if you've removed something you shouldn't have, you actually have to put it back before you can sell it. I would love to see us do that, yeah? Lisa's smiling.
We do have a covenant and easement that is recorded on every title of every property that has a low impact development or LID facility installed. So there is a notice on title for every single one of those facilities, including those rain barrel ones that we discussed earlier that folks took out and installed air conditioners. The problem with that is many people just don't read their title report. Right. And so until they go to sell and somebody else has, is purchasing it, does the problem arise? So we're trying to alleviate that problem from happening. That's what the sign would help us do.
Love it. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for your work on this. I want to thank the Planning Commission. I watched their meetings, listened to their comments, and heard Chair Bachmann's concerns, although he did approve it at the end of the day, but I did hear what he had to say on that. I also wanted to thank public comment, Karen, for your comment on stormwater and the very positive endorsement she gave of our stormwater staff and their commitment to public engagement. So that was really heartening to hear that, and thank you for sending that in. That was wonderful. On this same topic, on option 2, what would happen if we didn't do it? Are there consequences for not doing it? We talk about consequences of doing it, but what are the consequences in reverse?
The consequences happening currently. We have 4 homes that removed their rain barrels, and they had those air conditioning systems involved or installed. And so we are currently working with them to propose new drainage or remove the air conditioning system and reinstall the rain barrel, and trying to avoid those properties going to code compliance. So the stormwater team is currently working with those. I believe we're down to 2 property owners now. We were at 4, but we're currently working with the remaining 2 property owners to reinstall or propose a new drainage proposal, which has to come back in for permit review, which also costs the homeowner money. And so there is a whole process that is involved in a new permit for a new drainage facility or a new low impact development facility. So we're trying to avoid that hassle for the citizen, and really trying to make it as clear as possible that this facility has to stay in place.
Thank you, Lisa. And then what would be the consequences of not implementing option number 2 with the dispersion devices? What would the reverse of that be?
Oh, Toby?
Trying to find the mute button again. No, thank you. That's a good question. I'd like to, kind of looking at it from the other side, the other direction here. But really what I think it does in the few cases that we would contemplate this is, as I mentioned, the sequencing of different BMPs, best management practices that are often used. It would essentially shift it down to a less effective one in terms of managing stormwater on the property. So, that, like I said, in the grand scheme of the city, when we're doing this, to 2 or 3 houses a year, you could make the argument that doesn't do much at all. But, ultimately the goal is to try to give each homeowner the best opportunity for managing that stormwater on site.
Thank you. Councilmember Gupta.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Really appreciate all the time and effort that's gone into this. I also appreciated getting a better understanding of the scale, 2 to 3 projects a year. I think that was very helpful for me. Maybe I was hoping you could talk about why King County, I think it was mentioned that dispersion is a preferred BMP for King County, but then why they would, in the stormwater design manual or surface water design manual, not allow that, not permit dispersion devices within 50 feet of a steep slope area, and what are the local conditions in Sammamish that make us think that this would be an appropriate or an effective or responsive solution for our community?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's at the core, it gets to the fact that steep slopes are regulated through the critical areas ordinance, and King County's critical areas ordinance, is really what informed this element of it. You'll notice the Department of Ecology doesn't make recommendations at all, simply because they don't regulate critical areas through their drainage framework. If you go to other communities, such as Bellevue, for example, they refer to buffers or setbacks on steep slopes. Buffers apply to the top, setbacks apply to the bottom, I think, or vice versa. But each agency looks at it through their critical area lens a little bit differently. And the way I think King County's view, if you will, translated was, setback 50 feet, and it applied to both ends. It's like I said, with the city here, we looked at a couple cases where we feel it would be appropriate to allow that to be reduced at the bottom, under certain circumstances. But, the process by which King County arrived at that 50 feet, I don't have real insight into, but I know it is born out of the critical areas code.
Okay, thank you. So is the idea that we are looking at past developments, existing development, and saying, oh, we really could have done this better by having allowed this, by having allowed dispersion rather than whatever practice they ended up using? Is that...
Yeah, there's two in particular that have come through this past year. And I work with the development review team, weekly. I meet with them and kind of go over challenges and what have you. And this particular issue came up twice, and that's really what informed the decision to incorporate this into the current batch of addendum updates.
Okay, so we saw some results where we said, okay, here's a way we could have done this better, and we're going forward, we don't want to put ourselves in that same position necessarily.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
So the drainage review flowchart, is that a new process, or is that process been existing?
That's as old as time.
Oh, okay.
No, that's been in the King County manual for 15 years, 20 years.
So specifically for Tamarack, is that new, or has that always been there?
Stephanie?
Yeah, I believe Councilmember Lamb may be referring to the relatively new flow chart that was added with our update to the addendum a couple years ago.
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at attachment C. It says, when is drainage review required?
In the 2021 addendum.
So I was just curious when Tamarack was added then.
I think Tamarack was originally added in the 2017 timeframe update. AHBL was...
That's correct. Yeah, it was a 2017 update. And then in 2021, we wanted to make something that was easier to follow. And so we added the graphic to show the flow chart.
Okay. I guess when I look at this chart, for me, it's really helpful to see the comparison with when somebody is building something anywhere in Sammamish versus Tamarack versus if it's in a critical drainage area draining to Pine or Beaver Lake, or if it's in a critical drainage area draining to a landslide hazard area, because when you look at this chart, it really shows specific emphasis that Tamarack is pulled out, that a drainage review is required when there's any net increase in impervious surface. I mean, that's even more stringent than for the critical areas for a landslide or draining into Pine Lake, and it's definitely more stringent than anywhere in Sammamish. So, I understand there's a lot of issues when building occurred in the past in Tamarack and in the Inglewood Plat area, but it seems that moving forward that we're addressing Tamarack in a way that we haven't done before to prevent any new problems. Would you say that's correct?
The level of scrutiny is certainly greater. Each step, if you will, within the different types of drainage review, each one has additional requirements, both in terms of the reporting and documentation, as well as the imposition of specific core requirements. And to your point, Tamarack and Inglewood are the most restrictive in that respect.
Okay, great. I did have one question, which is just in the Sammamish addendum. It's not one of the addendum additions that you want to make changes to, but it had to do with artificial turf. And it said that artificial turf is considered a pollution-generating surface, and that depending on whether or not there's underdrains, it's considered pervious or impervious. So I'm curious as to whether or not there's any regulations on turf, artificial turf, in any of our regulations. Given that it's a stormwater issue and it's going to be a climate issue, and where would that be addressed?
Yes, is the quick answer to that. I think probably the best way to answer that might be providing the example. They're obviously putting in fields at Inglewood Middle School right now, and those are turf. And we had a series of pretty in-depth meetings with the design consultant there, trying to arrive at opportunities for managing that stormwater. It is pollution generating. The method of treatment for that is through mixed soil media that provides filtration and cation exchange and a whole host of, scientific opportunities to collect pollution. And then ultimately, after that level of treatment, it drains into the ground. So the stormwater code provides that level of scrutiny, if you will, and response to turf areas. Some of the specific requirements that do exist, for example, the under drains, what they find is the water goes through the turf, it goes through the gravel media that kind of supports it, gets collected in the drains, and then it just flows off. There's some attenuation in the flow, but generally the water in equals the water out. So that's why that's viewed as impervious. And, there's a long list of, discussions with King County over the years to arrive at some of these things. And we've, incorporated those into our addendum in a way that, is responsive to both the Inglewood, ball fields, as well as the homeowner that wants to, put in artificial turf in their yard. But in terms of moving forward with the code, at this point, the manual and the addendum are the mechanism that we're using to address those issues.
So I understand that we would have looked at it, when we're building these big sports fields like Inglewood and Klein, but I'm more interested in the turf that I'm seeing, artificial turf that I'm seeing in people's backyards. People are putting them in front yards now because they want to keep their lawn green, and summers are getting hotter. And are we in any way looking at regulating artificial turf from that perspective? Like when you get 4 or 5 homes on a street that may want to be converting, that's going to create stormwater issues. It's going to create heat island issues. So I'm just curious, moving forward, is staff considering looking at artificial turf in terms of development regulations?
Yes, we already do. I think the biggest challenge we face so far is just public education, getting people to be aware that there are requirements for this. As you noted, somebody down the block puts it in, think, boy, this is great. I don't have to mow my lawn and it's green forever. And then the next person does this. But, that's at this point, the real challenge is just getting the word out that there are requirements and there is review required by the city. So to the extent that we can, educate through our permitting process and some of the other measures, we've been successful in doing that. But, there's still need to broadcast that information.
Okay. Because, I would actually like to see a ban on artificial turf in our city. I understand when it's functional for athletic fields, but I do think that, a ban would certainly, particularly with the environment that we are in, today, it would be a step in the right direction. But I guess that's, a different conversation for a different time. So thank you.
I appreciate those comments, Councilmember Lamb, and I think when we do come back before June of 2027, that is something that if council is interested in pursuing, we could definitely consider.
Oh, great. That sounds great. Thank you. Oh, did you say, when did you say that?
2027.
2027. Oh my gosh.
Aren't we all counting down to December 2025?
We plan ahead.
Well, that's like a bit far. Maybe 2025?
So the revised code is required to be adopted by June 30th, 2027. So you'll see us quite a bit sooner than that.
Oh, okay.
So when staff brings these forward, is it just like researching, seeing what ecology is doing, King County? Is that how these kind of and how often do they come? Because it looks like the last time was a couple of years ago. Does it come every couple of years where we're adding addendums? So we adopt King County and then we're like, but let's fix a couple things. Or like, when do you think this would come again? Or does it come with technology?
It's a great question, Mayor. We are required through our stormwater permit that is regulated by Department of Ecology to have an adopted stormwater manual. And so King County typically takes about a year or so, working with all the agencies, of course, to update their manual. So after the next permit is issued, our stormwater permit was just issued by Department of Ecology, I believe, yesterday, and will be in effect on August 1st. So I would anticipate in about a year and a half from now, we'll be looking at how to work through the next manual update for that. We would work with King County on that, and of course, bring it back to council for consideration. And at that time, we would also be updating our addendum. There are opportunities to update our addendum at any point in between, should there be an interest from council. These particular code amendments and addendum amendments today were brought forth from staff.
No, that's super helpful. That's, I mean,
required every 5 years.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
in between as needed.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Stewart, did you have something to add?
Sorry, just a follow-on question. Great questions by everybody. When you say for the dispersion is more effective, is it more effective because it's a better stormwater outcome, or it's more effective because it's less expensive?
It's a better outcome. Really, the kind of higher level directive of a lot of these requirements are slowing water down, if you will. Getting it into the soil, capturing it in vegetation, just slowing it as it spreads across the ground. And the intent, obviously, is to try to replicate normal stream flows and regimens. And that's, in a wooded site, for example, that's, those flows really slow down. You can imagine, comparing a densely wooded area to a paved area, huge pronounced difference. So the goal with the dispersion is, it does percolate it. It does spread it out. It does slow it down. So that's the effectiveness element. And, to the challenge in most urban sites is just a lack of real estate, if you will, to build something like this. So when it is effective, it's recommended to try to pursue that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, if there are no other questions or comments from council, I am going to close this hearing on the Stormwater Addendum Code amendments. Next up, I will entertain a motion to pass, or if anyone else would like to do something different. Deputy Mayor Howe?
I move that we accept the Sammamish Stormwater Addendum Code Amendments 2024-566.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would anyone like to speak to that, or would you like to speak to that, or any other discussion? No. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Great. Thank you so much. I think we're only losing a couple of you. I think Wayne and Helen. Yeah. Thank you for sticking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Unfinished business. Contract award for Lewis Thompson Road Tightline project construction.
All right. Well, we have a full agenda this evening, so really excited. It's Public Works Night, I think. Jed Ireland, our senior project manager for the Lewis Thompson Road Tightline project, is joining us for a quick presentation, and we'll be summarizing our bids that we received for the project. Very excited. We do have a motion prepared for you at the end of the presentation for the contract award itself. I'm also joined by Doug Van Gelder, our city engineer, and of course, Greg will be joining me throughout the evening, as well as our deputy public works director. Jed, whenever you are ready, go ahead. Jed, I believe you are muted.
Hopefully I'm still unmuted right now.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is the Lewis Thompson Tightline Bid Award. We made it. We've gotten to this level. And so I will, oops. Okay. Interesting. Okay, well, this didn't work the way I wanted. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to try to reshare. Apologize. Okay, this should work better. Oh, well, this one didn't work. Okay. Well, unfortunately, okay, so the star represents, oh, I see what happened. Okay, user error, apologize. You might recognize this slide as part of the life cycle of a capital improvement project. And the star is representing that we're just going from design into the construction phase for this project. And the project is estimated, the construction phase is estimated to take 15 months to go to completion. And so go to the next slide. What we're looking at, this is the bid opening summary, and you'll see that we had 9 bids. So it was a very good turnout. And that's probably why we resulted in a pretty good cluster of bids on the 2 different schedules. Schedule A is the city portion of the work, which is the stormwater component and the sidewalk, basically the city's project. Schedule B is for the water main replacement, which is owned by Sammamish Plateau Water, our partner on this project. So we're really happy with their participation and diligence on this work. Both schedules came in lower than the engineer's estimate. Schedule A, particularly, we had several bids that were around the $7 million mark for the city's component. Pavetta Brothers Construction was the low bid, and you'll see it for $6.7 million there. So we have some upcoming dates. After this is awarded, we will sign contracts and we'll having a pre-construction meeting with Pavetta Brothers Construction, and they will be providing their schedule and we will begin in earnest. We're planning August 7th to have a virtual public meeting and that meeting will be for the residents so they can hear how the temporary traffic control really affect them, their local access, their deliveries, and school busing. Likewise, around this time, mid-August, we're looking at a groundbreaking ceremony for dignitaries. That time is to be determined. Again, we'll be working with the contractor's schedule so that this will happen right before construction is ready to begin. Here are the project costs. And I would just show that the $6.7 million is for Schedule A. That is the city component. This project was bid with the assumption that council would award both Schedule A and Schedule B because they're needed to go together. The water main, partly to get a new facility and to get out of the way of the storm drain that we'll be installing in the adjacent the existing gutter system. Schedule B is the portion from Sammamish Plateau Water, and they have accepted this. We've also have an interlocal agreement with Sammamish Plateau Water, so they'll be reimbursing for this schedule. It's within their budget. They approved it last night. And so you'll see at the bottom of this table, there are 2 negative figures. These are pass-through reimbursements. So the expenses for Sammamish Plateau Water are pass-through, and then these will be reimbursed by them on a regular basis throughout the project. And then again, this has been seen before. This is the grant funding, our partners with King County Flood Control District and the American Rescue Plan Act. This grant is administered by Washington State Department of Commerce. And here we have the recommended motion. And again, this is for both schedules A and B as intended. And there's the amount. And at this time, I'll take questions, if any.
Could that motion be longer? All right, thank you, Jed. Council, any questions or comments? for a motion. Councilmember Stewart.
Okay, don't take that off the screen. I'm going to have to read that. Move to authorize the city manager to execute construction contract with Pavetta Brothers Construction, Inc. for the Lewis Thompson Road Tightline project in the amount of $8,200,469.16 and to administer a 15% construction contract contingency.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I'm very excited about this project, and I'm super excited that it came in a little bit under budget. I'm going to put in one more plug that says we seriously should consider finishing out the gap there. I will tell you that riding my bike on that road, I had two, not one, but two cars pass me by crossing the double yellow line into the other lane just 50 feet from a blind curve. So it's not just because it would be nice to fill that gap. That will be an access point to the trail, and I really think that from a safety perspective, we should consider doing that way sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, council, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Well, thank you so much, Jed. I think that's all we have you for.
Thank you.
Thank you for your PowerPoint. Okay, on to new business. Introduction to the TMP.
Hi, good evening. Lindsay Channing, our transportation planner, will be joining us this evening. I am providing an introduction to the Transportation Master Plan, or TMP. Again, continue to be joined by Greg Stemetier, our Deputy Public Works Director, and we are really excited to provide an opportunity to share with Council where we are with the draft TMP, as well as some future updates and what we have planned for it. So, and we also have a few questions prepared for you to consider at the end of it to kind of facilitate discussion for the TMP. Before I get going, I just would like to also note that this is an introduction. We'll be back quite a bit over the next year or so as we work on our bike and ped plan and the TMP update as well. So really quickly, I kind of already provided a little bit of what we'll be talking about this evening, but I did want to emphasize throughout the conversation tonight the connection to the city's comprehensive plan update process. We'll spend a few minutes going over the transportation elements of the comprehensive plan for the 24 update, as well as our current adopted plan. We would like to talk through, or sorry, spend some time discussing the significance of the TMP. We're very excited about it, as well as provide a little bit of a sneak peek into the chapters of the TMP, as well as we'll spend a few moments talking through multimodal level of service and a few next steps. Before we get going a little bit, we have presented a similar presentation to the Planning Commission as well as the Parks Commission, so we very much look forward to council input this evening. So you may have seen a similar slide before in other presentations, but this is, we have brought forward very recently some capital planning efforts. So I'm going to talk kind of to the right of my screen from the bottom and work my way up. So the end result in all of our really great long-term programmatic planning work is a 6-year capital plan. So if we jump now to the top of the screen, the work that we're also working on right now is our comprehensive plan update, including the transportation element. The element provides the foundation for the TMP. Within the element is the transportation vision, the goals, and the policies. Within the TMP itself are the strategies that the city is planning to embark upon to reach those goals and policies, as well as implementation plans that, of course, will end up with our 6-year capital improvement plan for transportation. And just a quick note, we'll get into this a little bit more in the next slide, but that we are planning to recommend that the TMP be adopted by reference as a dynamic reference into Volume 2 as in the comprehensive plan update process this year. So bigger picture, I know we've seen this in multiple presentations over the last few weeks, but we do have a lot planned for 2025. This is a slide from our very recent Transportation Improvement Plan, or TIP, 6-year capital plans presentations. So we are working right now on our transportation master plan. We're planning to bring back a TMP update in 2025 that would include any updates from our town center supplemental EIS or SEIS work, as well as our bike and pedestrian mobility strategic plan. Those two outcomes of those plans would be incorporated into our TMP update. So the TMP that we are talking about this evening is simply providing the framework for a broader update that we'll see next year. The Transportation Division of Public Works is also working with traffic engineering and some consultants on a citywide strategic streetlight plan, a pavement management plan, and we as a city will be looking at traffic impact fees along with our park impact fees in 2025. So a lot of big things happening in 2025. As we end 2025, we'll embark on our Intelligent Transportation System, or ITS, strategic plan, and some of that work will be folded into a next TMP update in a few years out. And of course, during this whole time, we are working towards our corridor studies and finalizing those studies with a preferred alternative and an adopted plan for each corridor. So taking a quick moment to talk through the differences of our current comprehensive plan and what we have proposed for this comprehensive plan update. So our current comprehensive plan, our goals and policies live in volume 1. That will stay the same with this comprehensive plan update. Currently in volume 2 of our adopted plan contains all of the GMA, or Growth Management Act, such as level of service and our project list. These are all based on existing and future conditions. All of that work will be included in our TMP, and we're adding a lot more things to it. The intent here is that we'll have one plan that serves all things transportation for the city. Having a transportation master plan is very important, both for the city as well as regionally. Ideally, a transportation master plan reflects input from the community. It advances our multimodal transportation vision, implements goals and policies that I just spoke to a little bit from the transportation element. Of course, aligns with all of the other plans that we're working on that I discussed a few slides ago. And most importantly, the TMP can be thought of as a framework that guides all of our transportation decisions in the future, particularly our investments. So really looking forward to a lot of conversations along the way for the rest of 2024 and 2025 as our TMP is finalized and updated. And of course, a prioritized list of projects, programs, and strategies that guides the city for the next 20 years. This is an overview of the structure of the TMP, and we won't go into details this evening. Again, this is just an introduction to what it will be. Of course, we are taking a deep dive into our existing conditions, our future conditions, as well as our vision and how we, as a city, plan to implement the goals and policies and elements. We will likely be combining chapters 3 and 5. Of course, the TMP will reflect public engagement and all the outreach we've heard along the way, and of course, how we can implement our plan. The biggest change for this comprehensive plan cycle for transportation is the development of a multimodal level of service, often referred to as MMLOS. This is something that will be incorporated into our draft TMP for your review this year. And of course, will be expanded next year as we finalize our TMP update and refine our TMP a little bit and complete our bike and pedestrian plan. So what is multimodal level service? It is something that looks at a way for the city to improve all modes of transportation. So that includes vehicle transportation, transit, bike, and pedestrian. So we currently have level of service, or LOS, standards for vehicle transportation within the city. That part will be retained throughout the TMP and the comprehensive plan. Our level of service for vehicles is based on intersection level of service, and that determines, that's the foundation for our concurrency program. With this TMP update, we will include transit level service guidelines. Those were proposed in the transit plan. There's 3 types of guidelines that we are looking at. Transit operations, access, and rider comfort. These are items that the city has an opportunity to influence and improve versus something that the transit operator, King County Metro, may have an opportunity to improve. Keep in mind that these guidelines are goal-based and metric-based, and they do not apply to transportation concurrency programs or requirements. So it will also be new with the TMP and part of the multimodal level of service are bike and pedestrian level of service guidelines. Again, they are metric-based and guidelines, and we're setting goals as a city to accomplish those over time. They are not part of our concurrency program. There are multiple methodologies to look at when considering multimodal level of service. One methodology that we are recommending proceeding with is a comfort-based methodology. I'll get into that in a little bit. It is often called a level of traffic stress, or LTS. And I have a few more slides. We'll get into a little bit more details of that. But we really, once we have the draft plan, and it would be a great opportunity to really focus on what LTS could mean for Sammamish. LTS for pedestrians and bicyclists would apply to our principal, collector, and minor arterials only. And we can get into that in a little bit as well. So this is a fairly common figure that you'll see in a lot of other cities' transportation master plans or comprehensive plans. It's a great way to describe different levels of traffic stress. Again, it's a performance metric. It's based on for bicyclists, the bicyclist rider's level of comfort. For pedestrian, of course, their level of comfort as they are biking or walking next to vehicular activity. They have a scale from 1 to 4. An LTS 1 is typically something where a new bike rider or perhaps someone with a stroller might be comfortable walking alongside a vehicle level of travel. An LTS 4, strong and fearless riders, these are scenarios where bicyclists maybe it's a shared bicycle lane along with traffic. They need to have a little bit more skill set to be able to ride comfortably within traffic. The TMP will include quite a few images for our current network. So most of our arterials and collectors currently have an LTS 3 or 4. Staff and consultants will be recommending that the city over time work towards an LTS 2 or a lower level of traffic stress. Again, it's goal-based and something the city can work towards over time. Looking at lower levels of traffic stress is something that would align with the city's climate action goals and reduction of vehicle miles traveled. So there are many, many strategies that an agency can get implement to get towards a lower level of traffic stress. So the image on the right kind of showcases a handful of different ways that we can get there through design of our roadways. There are a lot of other tools that we can choose to utilize when we implement level of traffic stress and try to reduce those, including speed control. So the images below are a great visual, but that is not necessarily what we have to do for every single roadway within the city. Part of the work that we're doing with our corridor studies will help us identify ways that we can lower traffic stress on some of our roadways very creatively, whether that's maybe one bicycle lane or maybe it's a bicycle opportunity that's protected in some areas. It may look different in some other areas of the arterial. This was just a quick recap of how level of traffic stress could be applied at a planning level. So it will be included as part of our transportation master plan that will be adopted through a dynamic link in our comprehensive plan update. Of course, we'll be exploring ways that we could reduce level of traffic stress for bicyclists and pedestrians in our bike and ped plan in 2025. We're already looking towards some of those improvements in our corridor study with Sahali Way. And of course, complete streets. We do not have an ordinance, but we can review what that could look like for our public works standards as we look towards multimodal road design efforts going forward. And this was just a sneak peek into the rest of the year. We are working towards finalizing the first draft of the TMP and are very excited to present that to Planning Commission next month. So we really look forward to hearing their feedback. There will be a public hearing and recommendation hopefully made to council in August. And then the entire TMP will be brought forward to City Council for your feedback and review later this year. And then of course, we'll be back in 2025 with a refinement to our TMP. With that, I'll hand it back over to you, Mayor, for questions and discussions. We do have a handful of questions that we're hoping to prompt some of the discussion this evening, and we very much look forward to hearing input from council.
Great. Thank you so much, Audrey. All right, council. Deputy Mayor Howe.
Thank you for the questions as a prompter. Appreciate that, and for the overview. You know, I'll kick off, and I know everybody has just tons of really good ideas. One thing that is a challenge right now is, and I'll bring up e-bikes, because even the post made by the Sammamish Police has created complete confusion over what's legal, what's not legal, who's enforcing what, who can do what, and also how dare you government overreach. So there's, it's quite a spectrum from, oh my God, someone's gonna die, to outrage. This is a conversation that needs to get better corralled and controlled. And it could be used as an example of, there's probably other things that are somewhat inflammatory or not well understood that we could, you know, just look at now and figure out how can we approach this as a topic to get better outreach with the facts and clear information, and what to do. And what are you supposed to do? Like, what do I do if I see something? You know, that type of a thing. So I think the e-bike challenge is there. And the e-bike represents such a wonderful opportunity for a connection to last mile. It's also, do we have the funds to figure out how we're going to keep those bikes secure if you had to take an e-bike to a transit center? So is it a housing storage thing? You know, is it a locker? You know, what are we going to do there, and how much is that going to cost, and do we have a budget for that? I do see them as such an advantage. I want to try to figure out what to do, and I'll bring up something that is near and dear to Councilmember Gupta's heart. Even just bike racks would be good in many locations. Yes. So I'll just throw that out there. On the initial concerns about multimodal levels of service, besides it's a mouthful, you know, I think that I'm not as concerned about that. I think it's more a case of like the images, for example, that you presented for how people feel about something. I think that's appropriate. You could probably use that for walking as well as biking, as well as driving. So I think I'm going to lean hard into how can we help people feel better about that experience in general, whether it's waiting for a bus, you know, someplace safe, that's well lit, that's not uncomfortable, make you feel like a refugee, basically, running away, because that's what some of these, you know, stops are like. They look rather desperate. And it's taking a look at it holistically, I guess. Is that how can we make that experience feel better for residents as they journey through the continuum from walking to riding to driving to getting out of their car to parking to leaving their car to riding again and getting on a bike or walking in their front door. And how do we measure that in terms of how people feel in terms of that comfort level? And I think that the imagery is definitely the right path. And that's a really good way to start it, because people will respond to the images. They'll go, oh, I feel good about that. Or I feel concerned about this. So I think that presenting it in whatever you're going to present, if it can be done visually, the people will have a visceral reaction, and it'll be the correct one. They won't have time to internalize it. They won't have time to think about it. It'll just be the thing that comes out.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, thank you. I'm super excited about this. A couple of just logistical questions, I guess. So you made a comment that the TMP will be a dynamic link from the comp plan. So it will be a separate plan from the comp plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Because that'll make it easier, right, for us to update. Like we'll be able to make those updates. So that's very
Absolutely.
exciting.
And there is a initial section, I can't remember if it's in the executive summary or a preamble to it, but we'll very clearly define which sections are GMA compliant sections of the TMP. So those sections, if we are considering any improvements or refinements to those sections of the TMP, would need to be, of course, considered for our city's docket process every year. Other sections of the TMP could be updated upon council and staff suggestions as we look at conditions that may change.
Great. And I think that kind of answers my other question, which was you talked about having funding options, potential funding options in the TMP. And that makes more sense to be in a separate plan, not the comp plan, because I think those will probably be very dynamic potentially, right, as programs happen at the federal and state level, et cetera. Is that accurate then? So that'll be in the TMP, not the comp plan proper?
Yes, the funding strategies, if you will reside in the TMP. There'll be, of course, a handful of things that are in the comprehensive plan itself. I believe when it's talking about different, our funds in general, kind of at a higher level, but the funding mechanisms and strategies, something that the city is anticipating considering for advancing different projects or programs faster or slower to meet the needs of the community would be in the TMP.
Perfect, excellent. And then the diagrams that you had of the various street options actually speaks to a question I've had for a while, which is our definition, I think, currently of a complete street is sidewalk, bike lane, roadway, but the separation exists usually between the bike and the sidewalk, not between the cars and the bikes. And I was just curious if that's something we're looking at, because again, from a safety perspective, it feels like having a little bit of if there is room for separation, having that between the cars and the bikes is better than between the bikes and the sidewalk. So is that a standard that we get to choose, like there are options to choose from, or is that like a changing dynamic across the industry, or what's kind of the direction there?
That's a great question. I think it's a changing dynamic. There's different types of projects and technology available as over time. Seattle, I think, is just rolled out a fully protected intersection, so it was pretty neat to see for bicyclists. So there's a lot of different advancements industry wide, but I would say in the TMP, the first thing that we're looking at is holistically, how can we look at the city as a whole to make transportation improvements and prioritize. So something where we're looking at a protected lane, for example, on a particular roadway where you're hoping to identify that as a potential opportunity through either the corridor study or the bike and ped plan, depending on timing. And I just said or just because we have Sahali Way corridor study, of course, that is going on right now. But that's something where we get to that kind of more granular level of detail. Is it a fully protected lane, partially protected lane? Is it a shared space, shared trail, just still within the right of way, but protected by a vegetated buffer? We can look at those types of things as we explore opportunities through corridor studies plans and the bike and ped plan.
Awesome. And I definitely appreciate the, kind of how do people feel, but just from a real safety perspective as well, right? Like, are you safe and do you feel safe? I think they're both really important. And I know I would agree with Deputy Mayor Howe that how people feel and respond to it is so critical. I guess what I'm getting at is as we look at this, looking at our speed limits across the city, I think is also going to be important, because as you look at e-bikes and you look at different bikes and the speeds they go, we may want to look at requiring certain e-bikes to be in the roadway versus in a bike lane versus where we don't have a bike lane and people are riding on the sidewalks. Just because as those speeds increase, you start to get challenges with, fast bicycles and strollered pedestrians and things. So I don't know, again, I think that that's a very evolving situation, if you will, but I'd be really curious sort of maybe how they're dealing with that in areas where maybe e-bike adoption is ahead of us, to really see what the best practice there is. Because I know in some of the areas in downtown Seattle, they actually have different lanes for all these different things, but I don't think we have space, to have like pedestrians and bikes and then e-bikes and then cars. Like, that's a lot of space. So just really exploring sort of that holistically, I think would be really interesting. I know we had some presentations where we talked about, potentially lowering speeds in school zones universally across the city. It might be interesting to look at certain road types where if we lowered the speed limits, would that make it safer for the bikes if they have to share that roadway? So that would be something I'd love to look at. And I'm curious too, it feels like some of that e-bike regulation is something maybe we ought to put on our state agenda, because I feel like some of these things probably need to come from the state level down, as opposed to each of us trying to regulate them in each local city. So maybe we can talk more about that and see if that's a conversation we need to start having with our state legislators. It is not, I don't think it's a unique problem to Sammamish for sure. So thank you. I'm super excited. Thank you very much.
What I would add with a lot of the comments that you pointed out, Councilmember Stewart, we heard from the public also with the Sahalee Way public workshop that our Capitol team completed last month, and that Pertite is also exploring options on Sahalee Way of all those things you talked about: separated lanes, trail lanes that are shared with pedestrians, lower speeds, so that along with the TMP and the bike and pedestrian plan holistically over the city. Concurrently with that, we're also with our current corridor studies, as Audrey mentioned, hearing what the public has for suggestions and exploring what is the best fit for those individual corridors as well.
Awesome. And I'll put a plug in for Klahani Boulevard, that taking out parking on one side and making room for bike lanes through there, I think would be awesome as well, because that can get a little dicey at times. So. And it's an excellent corridor to ride through and get to transit. So thanks.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate how all these different plans are coming together all at the same time. So there's the pedestrian, the biking, the transit, the vehicles. Like, it's so great to have it all come together and to think about everything holistically, like you mentioned. One thing that like you were asking for some things that we were concerned about, 228th concerns me, probably for many reasons. Like, that is a great place for bikes in the sense that you want people to bike because we'll have transit there, there's stores there, there's sidewalks, but how do you integrate bikes, and now with e-bikes, in a way that's safe? I know somebody that had an accident, because their bike went out of control just because of the steep slopes. And I don't know what plans we have and how we're thinking about approaching 228th, but I'd really like to see some special consideration and how we integrate bike lanes better there, or how do we make it safer for people, because e-bikes can't, right now bicyclists, I see people riding bikes, on the sidewalks because, obviously nobody wants to ride on the road. So something needs to be done on 228th. Thanks.
Councilmember Gupta.
Thank you. And echoing Councilmember Lamb, it's great to see all these plans coming together, and also highlights what a great lift Public Works has. We just talked about stormwater, and now we have all these plans that you're working on simultaneously. So really appreciate all the time and energy that you are all putting into this. Also echoing Deputy Mayor Howe, bike racks, I think a very important piece of all this. We can have people, we can encourage them to get on bikes as much as we'd like if we don't give them places to store their bikes. I end up getting yelled at because I locked it to the barbecue and people have the pavilion reserved. So I'd like to avoid that as much as possible. Also very excited about the multimodal level of service. The way I'm envisioning it is that it will be a tool that we can use to help inform maybe capital projects that come out of the bike and ped plan. You know, that's a piece of the grading matrix that will help us prioritize projects. Is that accurate?
That's a great way to think of it. Yes. Okay. Yeah. It is a measurement-based level of service, so it is a little bit different than some of our standards, such as the vehicle intersection-based level of standards. So it's like I said, it's a metric based. It's based on comfort to begin with, and then as we implement it, it's more metric based. So we could consider a handful of different options as we're looking at our projects and ways to implement this consideration for the multimodal level service for bike and ped a little bit more with the TMP and next year as well. But yeah.
Great. I saw on Bike Everywhere Day, Move Redmond they just launched a map that showed all their bicycle routes and all those surfaces. You know, this is sidewalk, this is a shared roadway, this is a protected bike lane. So I'd love to see something like that. You know, some sort of map that shows maybe the comfort levels or just shows the access ways as our bike ped plan comes to fruition. I have big plans for next year. Really looking forward to it. And also, we talked about speed limits for e-bikes, which I think is great. I'd also like to emphasize speed limits for cars. I think that's a big piece of safety. We got, at the ETP meeting, WASDOT presented some safety numbers, and we followed up with them afterwards, and the data really highlights serious injuries and death, how much those are directly related to speeds. So I'd like that to be something we look at going forward as we talk about comfort. You know, a protected or a shared bike lane or a bike lane that is unprotected on a road where the speed limit's 25, I think is much different than a road, the same conditions on a road where the speed limits are 45. And I think there are also some efficiency and even financial benefits to slower speeds. So definitely something I'm interested in pursuing as we go forward.
Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you. I just want to concur all the comments are made so far about speed limits, bike racks, etc. They were all great ideas. I just wanted to add my tuppence worth and say that maybe we have some work to do around our schools and those kind of bottleneck areas, and maybe if it's possible to start working with school districts on, even if it's not possible to come up with, you know, widening roads. I see when traffic is coming up from the south end to try to get into Skyline High School, for example, that one right lane is always backed up all the way down to maybe Southeast 20th. And I just wonder if we had a better access into the high school where that traffic could get into its own lane at somewhere. So maybe that's something that we kind of think about. Also a program in the high schools to encourage our high schoolers to carpool, and not every single student has to come in their own car to school as soon as they get their license, although I know that that's very exciting and everything. And the one thing, a piece of information that I wanted to add was that I'd like us maybe to consider the addition of a transportation advisory board when we come to potentially implementing our very first TMP. I mean, I think this is a monumental event for our city. In our almost 25 years, we've never had one before, and it's 2024. So I'm really excited that we all get to be part of this monumental decision. We took it up back in 2018 and then put it away. So I'm glad we're dusting it off and reintroducing it again. And as a result, I think we could probably use help, and a transportation advisory board. I know Issaquah have one, every other cities do, and we may even have had one ourselves in the past. I know we had lots of various advisory committees over the years. So I'd like us to at least consider that next year when we come to talking about implementation, that this is something maybe that we could use. And I'm sure we have lots of our community members who'd like to get involved. So I just wanted to put that out there as something for us to think about. But thank you for your work. I watched Planning Commission's meetings on this. Interesting to what everybody has to say about it. E-bikes definitely are the future, and hope to be an owner of one someday, but maybe when the streets are a little bit safer. Anyway, I don't think the streets are ready for me on an e-bike quite yet. But I think Transportation Advisory Board, we would consider that next year, and it might help us with implementation and communicating with the broader community on where the city is going on this whole topic. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think the only thing I was thinking is if you have any good city TMPs that you all are looking at, just to compare. So I know better questions when this comes around next time, just different examples, just a quick Google search. I know all the nearby cities have one, but if you have some that you're like, this is what I would really like to see in the city, or something that would kind of fit our demographic, that'd be super helpful. But this is awesome.
Of course.
This is exciting. Yeah.
We're very excited.
Yeah, I bet. Council, do you have anything else on this topic before we move to the next one? Alrighty. Okay. I think we're losing Lindsay. Okay. We are moving on. Thank you,
I would just
Lindsay.
add before Lindsay hops off, we are working on our webpage for the TMP work as well. So of course we'll send that out. And I'll have updates as we finalize the TMP this fall and refine it next year as well. So thank you very much for all the comments and feedback today.
Awesome.
Thank you, Council.
All right. Next up is the introduction to the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm actually just going to hand it over to Stephanie and let her introduce the team and where we are to date on the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan.
Good evening, Council. Mr. City Manager. So Stephanie Sullivan, Senior Stormwater Program Manager. And I'm joined today by Toby Kanan, our Senior Stormwater Engineer. He is our Project Manager for the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan. And he will provide us an overview of the basin planning process, as well as give us an update on progress for the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan. So basin planning is a really important planning tool as part of our stormwater program. And as part of our enhanced level of service, our program is funded to do a basin plan approximately every 18 to 24 months, or about one every 2-year budget cycle. So Toby, when you're ready, is my screen share working?
Yes, it is. Thank you. This has freed me from the most trying part of these presentations. So thank you. And thank you, Council and Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Appreciate the attention. As Stephanie said, this is an informational presentation tonight. No thinking on your part necessary other than just receiving this information. So let's jump right into it. First, it isn't just me, obviously. We've got a team of consultants that have worked on this. This is a high-functioning group that we've worked with before on a number of different projects. Heavy lifting really is being done by Patty Dillon with NHC and then Aaron Nelson with Altaterra. We've given them the night off, so, I'm here. Our agenda tonight, as Stephanie noted, a couple items, really just give you kind of an overview on the process, introduce you to where we are with the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan, and then, let you know where we are in the milestone. We're roughly about 3/4 of the way through this basin plan. So kind of give you an overview of, where we sit with that one. Next slide. This is really kind of, I think you've seen this before in one of Audrey's presentations, but this is kind of the public works way of converting an idea into action. And you can see down on the lower left is where basin plans slot into this, but ultimately this culminates into, projects and other, programs and what have you that, try to affect these changes that we're looking at. Next slide. I think it's important to touch on as well here, just the value of basin plan. What do we get out of this? I think a good way to look at this is similar to, say, a parks master plan or a corridor plan. It gives that kind of high level understanding of what we're tackling. And the three elements that we really identified here, first, it's a roadmap, and it helps, outline, next steps, specifically capital projects, for example, different operational practices that we might adopt, and policy considerations as well. And the second part is just what we characterize as alignment, making sure that, some of the studies and the work that we are doing align with different efforts within the stormwater utility. And critical ones, obviously, are our NPDES permit. This type of work generally, aligns really closely with our retrofit program that we adopted a couple of years ago. And another critical area is obviously just, our code. How is this reflected in our, Sammamish Municipal Code? And then as Stephanie mentioned, service. This is aligned with our enhanced level of service as established by the rate study. Next slide. What is a basin plan? I kind of look at this slide as, the ingredients are on the left, and then the cake, if you will, is on the right. The three critical ingredients that we're looking at, talk a little more about later, are, an evaluation of what we have, analyzing, determining our priorities and goals and other elements, and then identifying solutions that are responsive to those priorities and goals and the information that we understand. All that gets, put into the hopper and compiled into a basin plan. And on the high level, what that gives us is, it's kind of a report card for, a specific drainage basin. It helps us understand really what's important of that area and ultimately how we can help improve that area, how we can protect the things that are important. Next slide. So kind of shifting gears a little bit into, specifics of the Pine Lake Creek Basin Plan. This is one of 14 primary basins within the community. It is one of the larger ones at 1,200 acres. It's predominated obviously by Pine Lake. The discharge to that is Pine Lake Creek, which, kind of wends its way down the hill and into Lake Sammamish. Shortly upstream of that, it merges with Canaan Creek, which drains Laurie Estates and some of those larger rural subdivisions in the southeast part or southwest part of town. Next slide. Why did we select this area? We actually went through this exercise of kind of prioritizing and looking at the different drainage basins within the community through the retrofit strategy process. And this graph that's shown here is developed actually by the State Department of Commerce. They're building cities in the rain. And this is a way to kind of evaluate the different measures of basin importance, as well as the amount of degradation within them. And then the idea is that you kind of compare those things and you apply them to this graph. And with that, you can identify which ones are, a good candidate, if you will, for devoting city resources to. Those are plotted here, and they also correlate in color to what we see on the map to the right side. To this point, we've kind of been, biting off, as Stephanie noted, one every year or two, and sometimes every 2 or 3 years. But we keep plowing away on these. And to this point, we've finished plans for the Inglewood Basin and the Thompson Basin, Laughing Jacobs Creek Basin, and now we're jumping into Pine Lake Creek. Next slide. Let's talk now about some of the ingredients of our basin plan. First one is evaluate, and this really boils down to looking at what we have. There's kind of two buckets, if you will, that fill that up. One is our resource review, and that's just going through all the maps and the plans, the data we have, monitoring from the stream from prior studies. All that kind of information has been compiled and looked at. We did a gap analysis to look at what we do need, what we have, and moving on from there. And then from that, we collected additional data. King County maintains stream gauge data for us through their ILA. We also undertook some water quality sampling. And then another big part of this was getting input from maintenance staff, parks department staff, for example, as well as stakeholders around the basin. And then we also conducted some pretty exhaustive site investigations, and probably every mile of Pine Lake Creek has been walked through the course of this effort. Ultimately, the outcome or the output of that exercise is coming up with a much clearer understanding of the nature of the Pine Lake Creek Basin, just kind of getting a feel for what we have. And looking at some of the unique attributes and, some of the real good positive things about it, and then also some of the challenges that we've observed. The takeaway from this exercise, real broadly, is that, for an urban stream system within a, populated community, the Pine Lake Creek Basin is in good shape. And it's, the hallmark really is a significant wooded, corridor that runs along the stream as it moves down the hillside toward Lake Sammamish. Next slide. Our second ingredient is to analyze, and this is taking that information and kind of going through and compiling it, looking at it, and deciding what do we have. A big chunk of that is on establishing different priorities and goals for the basin using that information. There's kind of two parts to that equation. One is how we go about doing that. A significant part of that was through open houses, and as I mentioned, stakeholder meetings that we had. We had 2 stakeholder meetings, 2 open houses, just a lot of input from neighbors and other interested parties. And then the other part is, what we consider as we do that. And that includes, regulatory elements like our NPDES permit, for example, public safety, and that includes, what our maintenance staff suggests, we got problems here, issues there. And obviously the environment, that's a super critical element of any basin plan because we are dealing with, at its core, natural resource. The other 2, property and recreation, a lot of those concerns and, priorities and goals came out talking with lakefront homeowners, for example. This is a significant element of the basin. The second aspect of this area is, the formal analysis we undertook. There was significant hydraulic modeling and hydrologic modeling to evaluate, what's the expected behavior of this basin during rainfall events and other types of scenarios. And then the second part of that really is kind of compiling all this feedback that we did get from neighbors and interested parties, and kind of putting all that together to see what kind of consensus emerged in terms of, what are the important things? What are things that people are concerned with? Are there repeated problems that come up? We got a pretty good catalog of that through this process. Our next slide, Stephanie. Number 3 is looking at solutions. Once we identify, what's the priorities, what are the problems, then we start thinking about how are we going to solve those? How are we going to address these things? And the 2, big buckets for that, one is, capital projects, the conventional things, what do we build to fix this problem? And we started with a list of about 30 different items. Through the public input process, we shared these during an open house, as well as just, talking with maintenance staff, and then just going through, internal reflection with these, winnowed it down to these 6 items that are listed here. In that process, I think it's important to recognize we did, follow the stormwater CIP prioritization process that the city's adopted. And then the second part are the strategies and programs. And these are what I'd characterize as the softer elements, that include outreach, education, potential, shifts in policy, steering things, in that avenue to try to affect changes and achieve the goals that we do have. Next slide. Jumping into, where we are in this process. Like I said, we're, if you look at using that cake analogy, we've got all the ingredients. We put them together, we're starting to, mix things up and draft our basin plan. We anticipate having a draft completed July 12th. Shortly after that, we'll move into, process of adoption. And that plan ultimately is going to give us a clear report card, as we noted, identify what's important, and talk about how we can help advance the goals and policies and priorities of the basin. So next slide. I wanted to give kind of a snapshot of where we're heading, if you will, as we try to wrap up this project. We're kind of at the 3/4 post, if you will. So I think it's important to give folks a clear understanding, as we move forward. First, I want to look back and just, again, outline some of the significant public outreach that we conducted through the stakeholder and open house meetings. Those are identified and dated there. The next step on that is, once we do have our draft plan, is navigating the SEPA process, and we anticipate initiating that with an application mid-August. We scheduled and sequenced that such that the public comment period would avoid, the August kind of doldrums when nobody's around and nobody's paying much attention to, things like SEPA notifications. But there's a 14-day public comment there, and that will give the community an opportunity to review the first draft of the document, and it'll also allow the city to conduct environmental review to evaluate some of the broader non-project, potential directions for this. One thing I do want to mention is we do have in our project list, as I said, 6 different projects. The SEPA review for this report is not specific to those projects. If that requires environmental review, that will be conducted separately. And then as we get through the SEPA process, the expectation is we'll generate a second draft of the report, and that will be introduced to council at November 19th meeting. And that will provide an opportunity for council. Noted, I think we've allowed 4 weeks for council input, feedback, and questions. Make some updates to the report, and ultimately adopt the final version first meeting in February of 2025. So I'm not taking this out to 2027, but getting there. And with that, we're going to wrap up with our last slide here, and we'll take questions and give additional information on feedback here. You can always email me. You can check our website, and recognize that the last opportunities for the public to comment anyway are through the secret process and then our council meetings. So thank you for your time and attention. You guys have all been great paying attention to what's been a lengthy evening, so much appreciated.
Awesome, thank you. All right, council, what do we have for Toby, if anything? Nothing. Councilmember Stewart is saying it was so thorough that we need no more. No, this is great. I can't believe you're going to have a draft in like 10 days. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Awesome. Wow.
The website's great.
Yeah, the consultants have been working on it. We've kind of gone through different inputs and what have you, and it's one of the first documents that will adhere to the city's style manual. So it has that bonus.
Deputy Mayor Howe is looking at the website and says it is great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Toby. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Excited to see it. Okay, Council, are you ready to power through? Does anyone need a break?
I just need a water. So if you guys want to start, I'll just go get a glass of water.
Do you need someone to bring you a water?
Okay, sure.
No, okay. Oh, Scott's got you. All right, let's keep powering through. Kokanee Work Group Annual Budget Work Plan.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I'm going to pass it over to our Senior Stormwater Program Manager, Stephanie Sullivan, for introductions. Go ahead.
Good evening, Council. It's Mr. City Manager. Thanks for having us again. So today's discussion is going to be on the 2025 Annual Work Plan and Budget for the Lake Sammamish Kokanee Work Group. That is a collaborative and regional group that we are a member of. It started all the way back in 2007, and it's managed by King County. So Toby Kanan, our Senior Stormwater Engineer, serves as the staff liaison who will present this discussion.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. I want to be clear. I'm not the only one who does things in the stormwater group, though it may seem that way this evening, but we'll plow ahead. As Stephanie said, this is an annual exercise of adopting the upcoming fiscal year's budget and work plan for the Kokanee Work Group. Councilmember Treen and Councilmember Gupta are the representative and alternate representative on the Kokanee Management Committee. So it's this. What we're asking today really is discussion and authorization to move forward with that. So next slide, Stephanie. Noted that there is a desire to come away with direction for Councilmember Treen and Gupta, to adopt the budget through the meeting next week or next month. As Stephanie noted, the KWG is a regional partnership. We are members of an interlocal agreement. King County provides, essentially the management service and the oversight and the technical expertise. Sammamish, Bellevue, Issaquah, Redmond, and King County all contribute financially to that based on a formula established through the interlocal agreement. The Snoqualmie tribe is also a partner to this agreement, as this is clearly affects a resource of significance to them. Next slide. This annual budget process is set forth by the interlocal agreement, with June 1 being the first milestone, where the Kokanee Recovery Manager develops a draft budget. That was presented to the staff committee on June 6th. We held another meeting on the 20th to discuss, by which time a consensus emerged in terms of what staff believed was an appropriate course of action. So we're unveiling that tonight for the council. 2 weeks on July 15th, the management committee will meet, and the expectation is that they'd be moving forward with a specific budget recommendation and adoption. The ILA establishes that the budget has to be, fixed by September 1. So the next slide, Stephanie, this highlights the budget, if you will. We were presented with 4 different options. All of them maintain the existing level of services that we have been the Kokanee Work Group has been providing over the years. No changes there. The nuances and some of the different add-ons, if you will, after that. First option made 0 changes, and it resulted in 0 net ending fund balance. So revenue and expenses would balance out. Option 2 added some new services for communication and outreach, and also ended up with that 0 funding end balance. Option 3, which is what staff recommends, is not to take on any additional work or new services, but to end the year with a $20,000 year-end fund balance. And then option 4 did the same thing with the ending fund balance, but added those services as well. Last slide here. It's just a couple things that I think help inform the discussion here. One is that the work plan follows the budget. So really they are part and parcel. There's no way to really separate those two. We're adopting both. The second one is we looked at the budget. These are all fairly significant increases relative to the 2024 number. They all exceed 10%. And as a condition in the ILA, anything in excess of 10% is compelled to go back to each agency's governing body. So that's why we're here today. The increases that we are seeing to the existing service are due almost exclusively to salary bumps at King County and some of the accounting that's going on there. And then the second one is the Kokanee Work Group utilizes a private hatchery up in the San Juan Islands called Long Live the Kings, which is given over primarily to Chinook salmon preservation. But they utilize their space to raise Kokanee salmon. They fly them back down here and release them to the lake. And that cost increase is due largely to the number of rearing cohorts that they have at this point. One thing that the staff asked the Kokanee Recovery Manager to do is tell us what happens if we left our budget at, capped it at a 10% increase, and there was a significant reduction in services. The consensus in looking at that was you're kind of taking, not just cutting the fat, but, getting into the muscle as well. So that really didn't advance further than that. Another point just to make is that this is funded by the general fund versus the stormwater fund. Stormwater does manage it. This started under the stormwater fund, but at some point in the past shifted to general fund, I think because it represented, a citywide interest. And then the final thought is that the ILA is a 10-year ILA. I think we're in year 6. And that ILA does allow, a community to opt out if they're so inclined. Just remiss if I didn't mention that. So with that, we'll entertain questions. See what thoughts are.
Deputy Mayor Howe.
Thank you for the presentation, and I want to thank council members also for their work on the work group. I'd already passed along some questions just about the work group in general to you guys, and I appreciate the feedback that you gave me. I passed your comments also on to the rest of council, so they would have benefit of that. My question has to do with when is the appropriate time to discuss the work plan? This is the budget. So when can we actually talk about the work plan? Because that's what we're funding. Well, we're funding humans at county level staff to work on a work plan, but at what point do we have an inflection point on the plan itself?
No, that's a good question, and it actually prompted a fairly robust discussion among staff and leadership. And, I think, one of the challenges with kind of steering that at this point that we looked at is really it is a cooperative effort of the different agencies. So I think, revisiting the work plan, in terms of envisioning how, that might move forward, I think would require, discussion with some of the other partner communities, all the other partner communities, as well as discussion with the Kokanee Recovery Manager, and assessing, the efficacy of some of these measures. I know that's a concern, is like, we've got these numbers and we're doing this work. Does, do the numbers support doing the same thing again? Does the money, is it, bang for the buck, if you will? So that discussion, I think, is a little more, if you will, longitudinal than, a one-year budget cycle.
Right.
But I do absolutely think it's appropriate for, council as a whole, and as well as, the representatives on the Kokanee work group to bring to the management committee. What I've seen personally is there's a growing recognition that, the way I've kind of always looked at the Kokanee is as a supply side, are we creating enough fish? And then, there's a mortality side, what's happening to keep the numbers suppressed. And I think there's a growing awareness that, there's start focusing a little more on the mortality side, in terms of, identifying new programs and what have you, and exploring opportunities to improve some of the results. But those are, kind of high level decisions that get ultimately distilled down into that work plan. So there's it's almost a chicken and egg thing, which one do you tackle first? But I wholly support the, having that conversation. And I think, in the coming year, that would absolutely be appropriate to dive into, and try to get some traction in terms of understanding, how effective our efforts have been.
Well, we know it's not working.
Yeah.
I mean, we know it's not working. So at this juncture, I just want to, posit to council that this is something that I think we might want to take up with our sister cities that are involved with the work group. Yes, I think that's the correct direction, to say, just to check in informally with our partner cities and say, how are you feeling about this? Well, if you had more of a blue sky or open slate, what would you do differently that could make an impact? And I'll just, a tiny example that occurred to me is that, gee, there's nobody working on maybe policy stuff at the state level to impact state level requirements to keep certain pollutants, for example, out of our streams and waterways. Well, now that's a long-term deal, but everything we do, everything, is years in the fruition of an outcome that's sustainable. Everything. So that's why I'm thinking, there's different components that we probably need to be attacking. And, one of it's going to be banning certain things potentially, so that we can at least start to get some of the pollutants out of the waterways. I can't change the temperature of Lake Sammamish. Well, I can't, but could I change the temperature in certain locales if I did something differently? So as I look at the problem, as a real problem with a creative way of looking at potential solutions, I just don't see them in the work plan. Now, maybe they're there and they're just not represented. Is that, I don't want to be unfair to the plan, but I also want to influence the plan. So that's my hope, is that we're able to talk to our sister cities and see if there's agreement that what's missing out of the plan.
I think you're right in that, certain of the work elements, the cryobanking of, material, the remote site incubators where, fertilized eggs are, implanted into these incubators, and when that fish hatch and so on, those are existing programs. Those are existing strategies, to try to supplement the native population. And, at face value, it's clear those are not, those are, kind of episodic efforts to, generate more fish. And they are not, policy type decisions, what have you. And I think one of the things that Kokanee Work Group, I think the other part of the equation, in addition to the county and then the other communities, is the members. There's a significant, probably 50 active residents, around the watershed that are members of the Kokanee Work Group that, regularly participate in meetings and have, input, feedback, and what have you. And, I think, mining that resource to chart direction as well is something that the KWG did try to do a couple meetings ago. And that's the offshoot of that was, additional communication and outreach and what have you. But I think there's, with, staff in particular from a couple of the communities were reluctant to bump budgets much beyond where we already were. So there's a dynamic there that, it kind of like budget and work plan together, in terms of the direction they're going with it. And that's just, how that played out, if you will, during the budget planning exercises.
Well, it looked that way just because no one was promoting new programs, really. In any of the 4 budgets, there were really no new programs, really, that were being put forward. So I think that there's a general acknowledgement of a certain amount of stasis. So, and maybe we have to just be static until such time as we're able to figure out a better solution going forward. So I do appreciate your answers to my questions, and I think the onus is on us now to do that outreach to our sister cities, partner cities. Thank you.
I do appreciate and recognize the need that, I come back to the saying, if you want things to work differently next time, do them differently next time. And we're not going to do them differently next time if we just keep trotting out the same work plan. So I think there's a certain wisdom at this point to ask these questions. And, I do appreciate that. And that's, absolutely something I'm, comfortable discussing with other communities, and trying to facilitate, conversations with other electeds. So
I'll just add one metric I'll be curious to see will be the Kokanee returns for 2024. I believe the life cycle is about 3 years, and in 2021 there was really good return. So I will be curious. I think that will help inform some of the success or not of the ongoing hatchery program. And the other point I'll add, Councilmember Howe, is that the Kokanee Working Group is very hyper-focused on the Sammamish watershed and the endemic Lake Sammamish Kokanee, but we are also members of the RIA 8 Water Resource Inventory Area 8 for the Cedar Sammamish watershed, which does, Toby was sharing with me earlier, does have information about treating pollutants and addressing 6 ppdq, the tire preservative. I can't remember what that stands for exactly. Treating that statewide and coming up with solutions to treat, get that out of stormwater and eliminate it from getting into stormwater as a statewide effort.
Councilmember Lamb? Oh, sorry. Councilmember Lamb?
I just had a question on that chart, the numbers on that. For option 3, shouldn't that be 319,000, not 303?
thank you. So let's start over. What was the question, Councilmember Lamb?
For option 3, shouldn't the number for the budget be 319,000 I'm just looking at the breakout that's in the packet.
Right. Yeah, the total budget, KWG is, the 4 communities and county support. And like I said, the formula that is used to assign, each community's share takes into consideration, the total area, population, and then I think assessed property value. And through that, amalgamation, they arrive at about a 29% cost share for Sammamish. And that's been fixed. That's every reason to expect that will, run the life of the ILA. But that's ultimately, this is, the amount with the year-end balance, tacked on.
Right. So we're paying 19.5% of the 303 that you're showing. Is that what you're saying?
No, that percent increase is year over year from 2024 to 2025. So we're paying roughly 29% of the total budget. And that 19.5% is just the jump, if you will, going from 64,200 in 2024 for the city's share to 76,745.
But shouldn't
It's a math problem.
Right, but isn't the budget amount 319? Am I just mistaken? And I'm looking at the breakout in the packet on page 126.
Excuse me, Councilmember Lamb, if I may, we'll double check that and make sure that it's correct in the end. I think I understand what you're saying. We can follow up on that. If that's incorrect on the slide, we'll make sure that it matches what's in the staff report.
Right. So I think that number is incorrect, is because we're paying 29% of that total number, right?
Yeah.
Of that number in question.
Yeah. The other thing I'd point out too is the county did get updated staff cost figures, and there is a series of spreadsheets that got rolled out. To be honest, it got too challenging to, I think there's 3 or 4 iterations of the budget. So make sure we grabbed all those numbers, but we will double check those.
Okay. And I know that we're not, option 4 isn't recommended, but that number appears to be wrong too. It's 346. Those were my only comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I really appreciate, Deputy Mayor Howell, your questions and the sort of probing. I guess my question is a little bit about how the Kokanee Work Group works, because in all the other sort of regional boards, and you brought up RIA 8, I used to be on that, that is where those conversations happen, right? Where there are presentations at each meeting where they talk about, here's the program, here are the results, here's what we think we should continue doing and do differently, and that work plan is reviewed in detail. So I guess my question, and I don't know, Councilmember Gupta, if you've gone or if you're just the alternate, but I think that's where our representatives should be kind of having those conversations and bringing those back. Not that we can't do outreach, but I feel like that is kind of the point of the work group, is to have those conversations there, and then share out those presentations that happen, where, again, if it's similar to RIA 8, we used to get those kinds of updates on a regular basis, where they would say, here's the program we're doing, here are the results, or here's, kind of where we are in progress, here's the, Toby, to your point, the tweaks we want to make to have a different outcome. And that's really what those meetings were about and those discussions were about. And these work plans were kind of reviewed and not approved yet, because we have to give the approval, but there was sort of a preliminary agreement within that committee that this is what we wanted to bring forward. So I guess it would be interesting to know, does the Kokanee Work Group work differently, that we need to do additional outreach, or is that happening there and we just need to get updates on how that's going?
I think both is the right answer to that. I think you made a really good point. The Kokanee work group is, maturing, if you will. One of the big steps forward they did make was, at one point the county just subsidized all the staff, and there was a decision made that, like every agency, they're struggling a little bit with budgets and what have you. So they, requested and the communities authorized, cost sharing for, specific staff time. And that funded ultimately a Kokanee recovery manager, a designated person, rather than simply just borrowing somebody who wore 4 hats at King County. And I think with that kind of maturing of the organization, I think we can expect to see a little more of that more systematic conduct, if you will, at their meetings. And I think probably the quickest way to affect that is to ask for it. And that's certainly something I'm comfortable doing, in terms of kind of charting how things operate and how they flow. But to your point, Rye 8 is a much bigger, much more well-oiled machine, if you will. And I think the staff there has been around significantly longer. And their mission, if you will, was established through state, enabled through state legislation, Salmon Recovery Act. Whereas the Kokanee work group was, really started more as an ad hoc group of residents, expanded into some of these county-supported programs, and then, grew into municipal funding as well. So it's it's kind of organic creation, if you will. And I think some of the operating limitations that you've noted are a result of that. But I think it is absolutely, appropriate to have that discussion.
Sure. I mean, there's never bad to have outreach. Just feels like it should go through that work group so that everybody's getting the same information and we can be getting recommendations, from our representatives and obviously you as well, Toby, on, any changes we might want to make just to kind of keep it flowing through the organization. So, yeah, appreciate that. Thanks. Love the history there.
Councilmember Gupta?
Yeah, thank you. In the poll that was conducted for the Kokanee Workgroup membership, it says who needs to hear the message about conservation, and right at the top is elected officials, and then what strategies make sense, make policy recommendations, or influence legislation. So at least among the membership, it does seem like there is a recognition that state influencing the state is a way they want to go. I am, new to council, new to the KWG. The sense that I got from especially the technical group, which is, a subcommittee in the KWG, is very much the same sentiments that Deputy Mayor Howe was sharing, is that the strategies that they have been doing are not yielding the results that they want. So I think from my understanding, the technical group is kind of taking that pivot point and saying, what is working, what are we doing, and really analyzing and setting up a strategic plan for going forward. Is what do we do to get the results that we want? Because what we've been doing is not getting us where we need to go. So hopefully there's some positive movement in that direction. And to Toby's point, I think with Allison taking over as the manager, they're really starting to take over those plans, set the plan in place so that we can move forward more systematically and less of just King County saying, here's what we're doing, and all the members saying, great job, we'll keep funding you. If there are specific things that you would like me to take to the KWG meeting, very happy to do so. I think we're meeting July 24th, but at least this month. So please get in touch with me. I'd be happy to communicate council's concerns and questions.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I believe the recommended from staff is option 3, if anyone would like to make a motion for that or for something else. Or I will, yeah.
I know we're not really supposed to ask direct questions, but I was wondering if Councilmember Gupta concurred with that recommendation as our representative. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I agree with staff's recommendation. It seems to make sense. I think communication and outreach is great, but I think maybe following on the points that we've made, there's a little bit more work to be done before we really focus on funding outreach efforts.
Great, then I will make the motion to approve the recommended option 3 budget and work plan.
Second?
All right, it's been approved, or, wow, not approved yet. Yeah, sorry. Moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to that, or Councilmember Gupta or anyone? All right, all those in favor of option 3, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Great. Well, thank you, all of Public Works, for sticking with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Appreciate it.
For the evening, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too. Okay, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Couple of quick items to remind about. 2 nights from tonight, join us out on the plaza outside of City Hall and on the City Hall campus and Lower Commons Park for our fireworks show, our 4th on the Plateau. It's going to be a great event. We got lots of food trucks and music, and looking forward to seeing the whole community come out and join us for that fantastic event. Also, another event coming up is on July 16th. We have, as part of our council meeting ahead of it, is a reception and recognition of our past leaders and community leaders and elected officials that got us this far with the city. So 25 years worth of those folks. We've invited a bunch of folks and hoping you have a good turnout. And so looking forward to having everyone come out and join us for that event. Because we are heading into the summer, I want to start making the plug now for National Night Out. We will be doing that again this year. We encourage everyone to sign up. It's Tuesday, August 6th. We'd love to have your event sign up so that our police and our council and some of our leadership staff would love to come around and say hi to the folks in your neighborhood and at your event. So please go onto our website. You can just type in National Night Out Sammamish and take you right to it. There's a screen to kind of a jot form to fill out. And then we'd love to put you on the list and send folks out for that event. So looking forward to that. And then, because again, it is heading into the summer, I just want to get the head nod and let the community know that I believe council intends to take a break in August and not hold any meetings. So I'm seeing a head nod. So just for the broader community, council's last meeting of the summer will be July 16th, and then we will reconvene again in September for the first Tuesday in September. So with that, Mayor, back to you.
All right, Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to address the fact that Councilmember Gupta and I attended the AWC conference last week. It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we're both freshman attendees, but it was really great meeting council members from around our state and realizing how every city, big and small, are all grappling with the same issues. And so that was comforting in one sense, and also realizing we all have an awful lot of work to do, but really can't do it in isolation, need to do it all together. So, I met council members from cities as small as Faircrest and Toppenish to our sister cities like Redmond were there. I met people from Port Townsend and the Tri-Cities area. Really wonderful to see that. We attended work groups on economic development, on behavioural health, on housing. We took a walking tour of their newly developed waterfront along the river, and really, really beautiful development that they have down there. So it was really fun to see. It was in Vancouver, Washington. Oh, I'm so wrong. Yeah. Great city to visit. I would encourage everybody to go. Great restaurants, great fun, and so it was a really worthwhile experience for us both, I think. And so I just want to let you guys know we were there and we came back safely, and it was great.
Representing Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you all know that we had our first Eastside Fire and Rescue FAC meeting, which is the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I will serve as the chair of that committee again this year. And in July, actually I wrote it down and I don't know where I wrote it, but in July we'll have a 2-hour FAC meeting to go through the department.
And that's why you're the chair.
The department. Doesn't that sound really fun, Mayor? We'll have a 2-hour meeting to go through the departmental budgets, the draft departmental budgets, and just giving you all a heads up that the chief will come around And there will be a very narrow window when he will try to go around to all of the cities to do the presentation, because we'll have to have like an approved draft that then he shops it around, et cetera. But I will try to share with all of you information as we get it, so that nothing that he presents is a total shock, and hopefully that will sort of make that go more smoothly. But we do have a pretty tight deadline to get that budget approved. And it will probably be interesting because they're currently negotiating their contract. So the budget will most likely be approved before the union contract is approved. So there will potentially be a mid-buy adjustment. So any questions? And I know, Mayor, we can have a 45-minute pre-meeting, because I know how excited you would be to go through all of the
budgeting.
spreadsheets. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite. Awesome. All right. Anyone else? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All right. All those in
So
favor
hard.
say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great. Good night, everybody.
We just don't want to leave.